If you keep talking to the same people every week, telling them about a new idea, they're like, okay, why is this guy? Why is he all over the place? You waste time, you waste effort, you waste money and credibility. There's these myths about speed and about size. Like how does Apple stay that innovative with, having tens of thousands of employees? It's just the way of how they embrace that whole process of innovation.
Welcome back to another episode of the Change Officer podcast. For this episode, our friends at Podster, me and Ivan, prepared a step-by-step tutorial for starting a podcast for your business. Find the link to the 20-step video tutorial in the show notes and learn how to create a successful business podcast completely on your own. All right, usually 95 out of 100 startups are doomed to fail, but what differentiates successful and unsuccessful business models, and what are the mistakes that founders do over and over that could be avoided? To help us figure out answers to these questions, we invited Abe, Managing Director at Startupbootcamp, Dubai Smart City Accelerator, COO of Rainmaking, and a fellow podcaster on the Abez Show. Abe is currently on the board of 25 different enterprises, and in the past he has built cool companies like Crystel and ZenHR. I am thrilled to have him in our studio, so get pen and paper because today he's going to share his vast experience and highlight most important things you need to know before starting your own company. I am Vuk, and you're watching the Change Officer podcast. Enjoy. Welcome to the Change Officer, Abe.
Thank you for having me. I've been watching your show and I've been wanting to come on the show for a while. So
thanks, man. It's a pleasure. Nice to hear that from someone who is doing such an amazing work on his own.
Thank you.
You've been around for a while. We're going to talk about some of your chapters later on, and most of the people are familiar already with your work. But you've seen a lot. You built companies. You exited companies 3 times, I believe.
Yep.
You worked with startups, you worked with corporates. In general, you've been venture building for almost 2 decades, I'd say, right?
Yeah.
And you've seen it all. We all know that, 9 out of 10 startups probably get busted, if not more, but maybe even more.
Sure.
I want to talk about common mistakes that startups are making in the early stage that sets them up for a failure later on. That failure can happen. It's good when it happens after a year. Probably that's great.
Sure.
But sometimes it happens after 5 years. All right. So what would you point out as the most common or the biggest mistake? Biggest is the, it's hard to say.
Very
but
loosely used.
Exactly. But if you had to point out one important mistake they are making in the early stage, what would that be?
So, I would think, talking about mistakes and, so there's one thing that you need to know for startups. I love the term when they say fail fast because, at least they've tried it and they got it out of their system. In saying that, a lot of the founders that I've met and a lot of the startup CEOs, they assume a lot of things, especially when you talk about the 2 major topics, product and money. Mm-hmm. And they talk about, I've tested this. And then, the real question is who did you test this with? And did you ask the right questions? So that a lot of people would assume just because a close family member or a close friend said, you should build this. There's a lot of traffic for this, or there's a lot of money opportunity making there. And the other one, when they assume that, within a year, I'll raise $1 million or you know what I mean? And you know what, if somebody gave me $1 on every time I heard this, I think I'll be set, honestly, because everybody said, yes, investors will come. And I'm like, why would they? You know what I mean? I'd be like, because in a year we would have been mature. We'd have a team, we'd have business. Okay, great that you have a plan, but you're assuming too much, right? So you're assuming a lot of things. But do you have actually day-to-day plan? We were talking earlier how you have, a 50-step process to getting something up. You talk to these people and they don't have anything,
Why do you think that's the case?
See, I think there's a couple of things. First of all, excitement at them being a part of something new That's always plays, and that they can use that as an actual good thing for the future. Number two, they usually most of the entrepreneurs I've dealt with come from two paths. Either they worked at a corporate and they do something really, really well, and they think they can do better than the corporate that they are, and they built a business around it, which is not usually the best ideas because they don't know what's the business full cycle. You know, they don't know anything about marketing and quality and sales, but they know how to build.
They were in a bubble, kind of.
Exactly. And the number two is kind of entrepreneur, the people that are running away from a job. And those are people I usually do not like working with them because they...
what do you mean running away from a job?
Like they don't want to find a job. They say I'm an entrepreneur. They want to open, you know what I mean? And we call them entrepreneurs or whatever you want to call them. And
do you think it's a path of least resistance, assuming things?
I think
I assume and you pray that let's hope it's going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the startups, you said 9 out of 10, I would say 95 out of 100.
Exactly.
And we've seen it because, I've worked with like Startupbootcamp where we have over 150 investments in MENA. And, we have shining companies that are doing really well, but they're a handful, right? The rest are still alive and kicking and they're still trying to figure it out. And then there is the people who gave up, right? So that it is a numbers game and it is something, but the assumptions game is something that is so dangerous because a lot of times when I see co-founders sit on the same table and everybody they're trying to convince the other co-founders about something that they've personally experienced, but nobody else on the table have. And when you build a business, as we said earlier, you need to solve a problem. And if you have four co-founders, and I would say 2 to 3 have not experienced the problem, then probably it's not a business or it's a one-off thing or it's something like I call them hit and run businesses, which I do not like to get involved in. I like founders who want to build a legacy. You know what I mean? Or something, you know what I mean? Like something that's
as cliche as that sounds, but I understand what you mean. How did you learn about this mistake? Did you have an experience where you assumed something and then real life slapped you, or?
I have. Okay, so other than everything we spoke about, actually my first entrepreneurial real thing happened in 1999. Okay, that was, I know, years and decades ago. Me and a couple of friends of mine, we built something in Canada. We built like a small social network. That's before Facebook and all that good stuff.
Sounds like a Zuckerberg story.
I wish it was a Zuckerberg story. But again, we didn't know back then, come to think about it now, anything about monetization. We sold it cost us like a couple of $1,000s to build. We were all 4 tech guys. We all worked for a telecom in the US. And we were all geeks. So we built something and then somebody said, how about I give you 4x? He's like, how much did this cost? And I think I told him something like $3,000-$4,000. He's like, how about I give you $20,000 and you sell me this thing? And we're like, wow, 20, I was 21 years old or 22 years old back then, and we're like, wow, quickest buck. So we started doing stuff like that, and obviously eventually failed miserably because we were building stuff that people didn't want. And the mistake is at least validate, again, go back and not assume that people want this just because you've experienced it yourself. So that was a good learning. And a couple of those, failed things. Luckily, we were employed. Luckily, we were worked.
Yeah, the kind of a safety net. So, and then my big shot came back when I moved back to this region. And then I decided to open the call center company named Crystel right now. So there was a lot of failures in the middle. But that first deal showed us how we need to build a sustainable long-term business and not a hit and run one-off. Oh, let's sell it to this guy. Oh, let's sell it. None of that. How much time you can waste if you assume too much, I guess.
It's not only it's time. You waste time, you waste effort, you waste money, and people's and credibility.
Credibility, yeah.
You know what I mean?
People patient, yeah.
If you keep talking to the same people every week, telling them about a new idea, they're like, okay, why is this guy? Why is he all over the place, right? So, you need to. That whole focus is a very big part of the business.
So for everyone out there listening to this podcast and curious, most of the audience is just starting. All right. There is a handful of people who started running their own business and then now trying to scale it. Most of the people are either flirting with the idea to start or they're just starting. One of the biggest mistakes is don't assume. What should they do instead?
Okay. So that's a very good question. And I genuinely say, listen, I'm a big believer of people should start stuff. Like I push, people to start their own ventures. That's a valid. But I also push people like having a basic spreadsheet with the basic questions that would validate what you're trying to solve. Examples would be like, when we were at Dubizzle, terminology even changed. They never called it used items. We call it unloved items and stuff like that, right? So when we were talking to actual customers, we'd have that in the survey that we would send it out. And we would do that of obviously the network effect. Well, I would send it to 20 people of my friends and then I'd ask them to send for another 20 and all that good stuff. And we used to get for me, well, Dubizzle was a different case, but if you didn't get a number of certain responses, then this is not a valid idea or this is not something that has been validated. We either hit the street, literally go to a mall and start, approaching people. Saying,
so you literally go to a mall with a spreadsheet and talk to people.
Yeah, and say, by the way, do you like this? You know what I mean? Okay. There's been a couple of stories where people thought we were harassing them, but when you're like valid, like when you like say, listen, I'm doing this, and you say, I just want 2 minutes of your time, and people usually give you 2 minutes of your time, and like and the other good thing about like going to malls and stuff like that is all kind of demographics are there, whether different nationalities, different age groups, different people come, residents or non-residents, and so you had a good idea of what's happened, and then the data speaks for itself. It's amazing how data 50 surveys, you can get a wealth of data out of 50 surveys. And, it tells you, okay, 25 people say that there's a problem. I mean, there is something there, right? And then you dig deeper, and then you go dig deeper.
How do you balance? Okay, you're all about kick off, start, go for it. Don't think too much, don't wait too much. But as well, you validate, don't rush into things. How do you balance between the two?
So again, that is by keeping your eye on the market. You know what I mean? If you're validating your idea, but you're also Googling, is anybody else doing it? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's amazing sometimes when you're looking into something, how many startups are still trying to tackle the same idea as you. You know what I mean? A couple of months ago, actually, I thought, I came up with this brilliant idea. Then there's a couple of platforms for startups. I logged in, and there's literally like 150 startups in that same space launched in this year. And I'm like, yeah, it's going to be a race. And you know what? A part of me, just because that's the experience part, saying, I don't know if I want to fight 150 companies right now, but if it was the much younger Abe, maybe. But now I'll be like, let's go a bit niche. So I started really zooming into more like niching up the business, till it ended up being very niche. And I said, yeah, there's not much customer base, right? So, but keep an eye on the market and talking to people and asking them, have you heard of something like this? Do you know who's starting this? That is a very big warning on how fast you should build stuff.
And that's what I wanted to ask you. So, okay, someone decides to go down this route of fact-checking, validating. Sure. What are some of the warning signs that they should keep an eye on along the way that is telling them something is off?
Okay, I would say a step back from that is make sure your questions are not biased. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people are so in love with their idea that, you know, if the person filling in the survey, especially if it's a face-to-face, they don't like what they're hearing about answer number 2 and then answer number 3. So they skip 4, 5, and 6, and then they go to 8. You know what I mean? Because clearly this person being surveyed is not where it's not where the entrepreneur wants to go.
Yeah.
And I've seen founders do that. They're like, they don't know anything about like financial inclusion. And I'm like, no, they're telling you they don't have a bank account. So ask them the next questions. He's like, no, there's going to be a template answer. Again, that person is in love with that idea so much that they're skewing the data for them just to validate, there is a business out there, you know? And I've seen that like many, many times.
Would it be a good idea to get someone else do it for you then? It's difficult not to be biased when you're talking about your idea, right?
Well, a lot of times, obviously, ideally, a third party, like somebody who's indifferent.
Yeah.
But because startups don't have a lot of money,
You're bootstrapping.
They're bootstrapping, you know what I mean? So, you know, we keep telling them, do that. If you have the money to get out of it, let's outsource that because you'll get better results.
All right. So anyone out there wanting to start a new venture, friends are approaching you every day, probably asking about the advices.
Sure.
Step 1, step 2, step 3 for someone just getting off the ground.
Okay. So it's gonna sound super cliche, but problem is a real problem, and then how are you gonna tackle the problem?
How do you validate whether it's a real problem or not?
Okay, so validation is by talking to people, and talking to people, honestly, it can start with a family, okay, and then if they give you the enough fuel, then you go to the second layer, which is friends and distant relatives, and then it's people out there, right?
All right.
And that's, you know, sometimes family does give good signs of saying, I love the idea, but where are you going to get the money? You know what I mean? Like these are good questions to address as well early, because you know, I'll give you a crazy story. I met a founder a couple of months ago who was trying to invented a machine that creates a livable airspace in Mars. Like it creates like a dome of air or oxygen that you can live in this dome.
Wow.
Okay. Now, obviously, you don't know if it really works or not because we're on Earth. So he's like, it's on, and I'm like, okay. But again, it very expensive. It's a small device. It can only give you like a meter of air. So like if you have to carry it along and stuff like that. But at least these are like crazy concepts, right? But nobody asked them in the room, how much does this cube cost? A, and B, how is it going to be sustainable? Like, are you going to, you know, carry a hose of fuel with you or like electricity or like, is it a battery that you need to change every half an hour? Like, but because it's on that crazy side of innovation, people were like tend to overlook certain things. So these are the things that you need to tackle. So that's usually the first step in actually validating the business
and the problem. Okay.
And the problem. Yes.
Make sure that the problem is valid and define what the problem is. Step 2.
Step 2 is how are you going to be different? Like, what are you going to offer? You know what I mean? Like, what differentiates you from your competitors or what differentiates you from the other? Once that, and then step number 3, which in my opinion is one of the most important, is team. Find people that address your blind spots. Like, I've always been blessed. I've been blessed and not blessed with certain co-founders, but my winning companies, we had people that, we've discussed exactly where our boundaries are. Abe does this person does that. Exactly, this is where. And B, we address each other's blind spots. You need people who are like-minded and share your vision, but they have to be a bit different because they're not your friends. You know what I mean? Like, you know, they have to really address stuff that is missing from you. Personally, I always thought I was bad with money because I'm a dreamer. So I always had a guy who grounded me in any one of my ventures. Very. Some people have creative people. You know, I thought I wasn't a creative before. I think now I'm a bit creative, but it depends. Again, it depends on the business. You know, it depends on a lot of things. And so the team is, and at an early investment, you know, and now moving from an entrepreneur to the investor side, I don't care what anything happens. I really care about the team, and there needs to be more than one, because, you know, sometimes people lose time and they lose energy and they lose focus. So that's when the good co-founders would bring people back together, right?
Is it true when they say, if you want to go fast, go alone? If you want to go long?
I disagree with that. I've, you know, the biggest example is when I worked at Dubizzle, it was 2 co-founders and it was a sprint. Okay, one person did the grounding, but they were running, you know, everyone was running faster than the other. It was like a sprint.
Wow.
And that's when you see really good companies really thrive. You know, there's these myths about speed and about size. You know, like how does Apple stay that innovative with, you know, having tens of thousands of employees, or how does Google, you know what I mean? It's just the way of how they embrace that whole process of innovation. And, you know, everything has to be agile. Everything has to be, you know, deliverable on a certain. You can't just sit there. I don't want to say this, but you don't want to be a bank where you just sit there and you assume people are going to come in and they give you your money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Again, no pun intended on banks, but
no, absolutely.
So yeah.
Look, there's, you know, especially these days in this region, entrepreneurship is becoming the hot topic, and it's great.
Sure.
Entrepreneurs are the ones who are really pushing the boundaries and you know, creating new jobs, opportunities, pushing the economy, etc. There's a lot of people out there. I love that you are on the show, because you are one of the few that can back up everything that you're saying. And although, yes, you know, some of the things sounds cliche sometimes, you know, go for the impact, not for the money, but coming from someone like you means a whole different story.
Yep.
If there was one thing that you would like the listeners of this episode to take away, what would that be?
So you talked about impact, and this is something I talk about even on my show as well. Impact is something that is very dear to me. And my impact was honestly to create jobs. We come from a region that is relatively lagging in that area. And, you know, I started a couple of companies in a couple of countries. But, you know, when I moved to Jordan for family, to see family and stuff like that, I saw huge opportunities, but I also saw huge unemployment. And you know, so for me it was to create jobs. Today, the ventures that I'm involved in or if I've started, I've created over 3,000 jobs of people working right now. You know what I mean? Not including turnover and all that good stuff. And I keep telling entrepreneurs and telling founders is, you know, everybody says money, and listen, money is great. Money buys a lot of things. But the mission in life is not money making. It's like what you do really, really well and impacts other people. Making money would be the result of that. You know what I mean? Like if you do things well over and over and over, the money will come to you. So, but just don't, like I hate when I hear founders saying we're chasing the unicorn. You know what I mean? I'm not a fan of unicorns. Not saying that you know, people who built unicorns, I give them all respect, but you know, when you're a dreamer and when you're starting a company and there's only 2 or 3 people in your company, let's talk about other animals. Then let's talk about the camel. Let's talk about the zebra. Let's talk about that before we talk about unicorns, right? But they need, you know, some founders, you sit with them, they really want change. You know, they want to change people's mentality. They want to do that. While other people are saying the hit and run mentality. How much money can we bill this customer now? And I understand that there's bills to pay. I get it. but it can't be from one to another. In the middle, you need to build a sustainable, like people know Abe for certain things, and I've been labeled that because I've been, focused on that and
consistent, yeah,
and consistent. So, so that's what I want people to go back. Impact is so important. You have to have a mission in life. For me, it was to create jobs and to create more jobs and to create more jobs, and as a result, doing that, you will end up making money because you'll be known for that, and you'll be known for. So those are the two things that I, that I really, the impact and the result of that is very, very important in my opinion.
I think that's amazing. It's spot on. I'm underlining this and echoing with the change officer. I think what you're doing with your podcast is amazing. We're going to put the link below.
Okay, thank you.
Make sure that everyone follows. Look, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, what would be the best way?
LinkedIn, honestly, is one way. It's Abe Seksek. If you like, or on the show, you can email me. It's abe@abezshow.com. It's very simple. There's also, you can reach out to me from the website as well. So I'd love to. I help a lot of I mentor a lot of companies, and I think I'm on minimum 20 to 25 panels a year in talking about mentorship and panels and we've dealt with I think a lot of people like working with me because I'm very blunt and straight to the point. And if I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. I'm not going to tell you, blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? Like popular business verticals are coming up right now. Stuff that honestly, I'm kind of a dinosaur in that I don't know anything about, right? So they're like, oh, agriculture. I'm like, I'm sorry, I never touched that. So that's not, as much as it's some cool space coming up and food security, I don't know anything about it. So if you're in an agri, please don't reach out to me. I would be no added value.
What are your sweet spots?
So lately I've been, so from my customer support and my call centers and all that good stuff. So I'm really good at customer experience businesses. I'm really good at AI and deep tech because of, how to automate a lot of the same thing over and over with a call center, and you have thousands of employees. They get thousands of calls a day, so millions of calls a day actually. I've been very last 3 years I've been heavily getting involved in smart city applications, which is how to run a happier, better city, and fintech. So those are the three verticals that I'm like really doubling down on. I do know a lot about other things like e-commerce and stuff like that, but a lot of founders do reach out to me, talk, can we get like a coffee and stuff. And honestly, I have 2 coffees a day with 2 founders, like that's my regular day.
All right. So book your spots.
Exactly. So, exactly. So, but yeah, that's what it is.
All right. So the change officer free giveaway. 10 coffees with
10 coffees, yes. Meet me at, let's just put a coffee shop. And it's nice how, this whole, now we're coming out of COVID and people are beginning to do face-to-face again. And literally when you walk into coffee shops in certain areas in Dubai or in Jordan, my city, or in Toronto or whatever, and I recognize people because they've been working out of there, or they're founders, or they're investors, and it's good to see people that are going back to and so yeah, the coffee. I never liked coffee, FYI. So just the FYI, I'm involved in a tea company as well, but tea is not coffee, especially in the morning, right? So, but yeah, I always somebody in the morning and always somebody in the afternoon. That's how I do things. So,
Abe, wonderful having you on the show, man.
Thank you, man, for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I genuinely enjoyed our conversation. And I think you asked some hard questions, and I hope that I've given you what you're looking for. And I'm sure we're gonna do this again.
For sure. Look, I picked up what I wanted to hear, and I think this information was super valuable. I hope you guys enjoyed as well. Please think about what Abe said. So don't assume, validate, fact check, don't rush, but balance it out, and think about that impact. Impact is important. Chasing money can bring it, but chasing impact is for sure going to bring it.
Yeah.
So stay with us. If you like what we're doing here with the Change Officer podcast, please like and subscribe. Leave any comments below. We're going to make sure to address them. If you want to reach to Abe, we're going to put down all of the links to his profiles. And stay tuned. There is another great episode coming out next Monday. Take care, everyone.